He's the king of pop.
Well, that's quite the intro as we welcome in Mike McAllister from CuseNation.com.
You are the Michael Jackson of Syracuse sports.
I'll take it. I've been called a lot worse, so I'll take that.
No, that's quite the introduction. All right, I guess let's start with the matchup. Holiday Bowl, which again I think in and of itself, my opinion is in and of itself, good bowl game, good payout. But I think SU fans may be a little bit disappointed with the opponent in the Washington State Cougars. What do you make of the matchup?
Yeah, I think the main thing there is there was hope that they'd end up in the Gator Bowl because you'd be playing an SEC opponent, and if you got a South Carolina or a Florida or somewhere, I guess, hoping maybe they'd end up with an Alabama, that you'd have a marquee enough opponent, it would be further motivation for Kyle McCord and the rest of the group to come back and play for Syracuse one more time to try to get to 10 wins. With a perceived lesser opponent in Washington State, who isn't ranked, and we know the whole conference thing with the Pac-12 and that whole thing is kind of weird. It feels like, Syracuse got a little bit of the short end of the stick opponent-wise. That said, this is a team that at one point was 8-1. They were in the top 20 in the country. They were, having a really strong season, but they stumbled down the stretch and lost to three teams in their last three games that were all finished below 500. So that kind of took a little luster off their season. But they have a really good quarterback. Their defense has struggled all year with stopping people. And that's pretty much the summary I got for you on the Washington State Cougars.
Yeah, and you mentioned they've got a really good quarterback, a quarterback that not only tied for fifth nationally in passing touchdowns with Kyle McCord, leads the team in rushing as well. So it'll be a challenge. But of course, with these bowl games, Mike, we never know who's going to play. We don't know who the starting quarterback for Washington State will be or the starting quarterback for Syracuse will be. Is your assumption that Kyle McCord will not play?
If I had to guess, that's where I'd lean, but I'm not like 90%, 100%, anything like that convinced that'll happen. Part of me still thinks, and perhaps this is, some naivety on my part, but part of me still thinks that if Fran Brown were to sit him down and say, listen, we had a great year this year, let's try to get to 10 wins. That's something that doesn't happen here very often. Let's get the whole gang back together one more time and really send this thing out on a high note as opposed to being a glorified exhibition game, which is really what it is, but with essentially half of your backups playing and guys that, may or may not have key roles next season, feels like, it's not really the same thing. Syracuse isn't putting the product that it's been all season out on the field.
As for John Mateer for Washington State, I mentioned some of his stats. He had a 375 passing game, a 390-yard passing game, 352. He's the real deal. But again, we don't know who's going to be playing in that bowl game, and that certainly will come as we get closer to kickoff here in a couple of weeks. How about the quarterback of the future? I know I've asked you several times throughout the year. You've said that you don't think the quarterback of the future is necessarily on the roster right now, and I know they're bringing in a transfer this week to visit Syracuse, Caden Salter from Liberty. What can you tell us about him? What can you tell us about the visit? And do you think he would be a good fit for the program?
Well, he would make sense in some respects in that, similar to Kyle McCord, he's a very highly touted recruit that went to a Power 5 school. He originally went to Tennessee out of high school, didn't work out there. Now, he didn't stick around and wasn't sort of cast aside as a villain or as the scapegoat as Kyle McCord was. But, he ended up leaving, goes to Liberty, and not this past season, but the season before, the 2023 season, had a tremendous year. He threw for over 3,000 yards, ran for over 1,000 yards. I think had 40-something touchdowns between rushing and passing. And then this year took a little bit of a step back. His accuracy dropped. He went from 62% completion to 56% completion. He went from throwing for about 3,000 yards to throwing for, I don't remember if it's 1,500, 1,900, something like that. And his rushing numbers were cut about in half as far as yards go. So I don't know all the ins and outs of why that was the case, if it was a total team issue, if it was him regressing. But the dip in numbers are a bit concerning. That said, he's extremely talented. He was a top 50 overall recruit in the country when he came out of high school, came from a really good program in Texas, has a strong arm, is really dynamic running the football, so he'd be a totally different type of quarterback than what Kyle McCord was. But if the staff thinks that he's the guy that can run their offense, then I think based on what they've done so far, you kind of trust their eye for talent there. As far as anyone else goes, I mean, they've been linked to a couple other quarterbacks. Ricky Collins, the backup at LSU, who hasn't really played. Connor Weigman at Texas A&M, who's kind of been in and out of the lineup. Those are two other quarterbacks they've been linked to, but no visits scheduled that we're aware of. And, again, they're going to continue to be very active in the portal, and I think a lot of the big-name quarterbacks that come out are going to have – there's going to be some sort of mention of Syracuse as a potential destination for them because of the success that Kyle McCord has had.
You want a quarterback out of the portal that's played, right? We saw the Carlos Del Rio Wilson thing. There's a reason these guys weren't playing. Even if it's at a smaller school, you want a guy who's played the position, right?
I think you'd prefer to have someone with experience. The main reason being, part of the reason you're going out and looking for a guy in the portal is because other than Carlos Del Rio Wilson, you really don't have that on your roster. Even Michael Johnson Jr., who was the backup to Kyle McCord all season and was a highly touted recruit, hasn't really played quarterback much during his high school career. He's had injuries, he got moved to other positions, et cetera. So I don't even know that he's someone you view as a potential bridge quarterback for a year. Whereas if you bring in someone who has that experience, I think that if you believe in Jakari Williams' future and, the guys coming in as class of 2025 recruits, if you believe in their potential as well, having a guy that can play for a year or two who has experience to bridge that gap between McCord and those guys makes a lot of sense. That said, I think they're going to grab the guy that they think is the most talented. And if that ends up being a guy like Ricky Collins, who was very highly touted, very high-level four-star prospect out of high school, who hasn't really played much at LSU, if they think he's the best fit and the most talented player, that's the guy I think they'll take.
All right, Mike, we're running out of time here. We got less than a minute, but Marcellus Barnes hitting the portal. Just your brief thoughts on that and any other guys that you've got your eye on right now in terms of leaving the program.
Brady Denneberg also announced today that he's leaving. So, listen, Marcellus Barnes is very talented. There's no question about that. He was an Under Armour All-American, very highly touted recruit. He started when he was healthy. So what's the situation there? He's not from the Northeast. He's from Tennessee. Could there be some homesickness? Could it be that the culture wasn't exactly what he thought it would be? Could it be that it just wasn't a fit from both sides, him or the coaches? That can happen sometimes. You don't really know, but either way, given Fran Brown's history as a defensive backs coach, that's the one position where if they lose a guy who we kind of all thought was going to be a starter for the next couple of years, I feel pretty confident he'll be able to find someone to replace him. All
right, more tonight from Mike on the TV version of Orange Nation, 7 to 7:30 on News Channel 9. Mike, thanks for the time. We'll see you tonight.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister. With that, we'll hit a timeout. Yeah, go ahead, Paulie.
Just one quick thing. Fran Brown also said, it was funny to me, I've heard him say multiple times, if a guy even mentions the transfer portal, he tells him to go because he's not going to fight for it.
Right.
So
got one foot already out the door.
Yeah, you don't know if that was the case either.
Could be.
And he brought up the question, and then it was like, all right.
We'll hear from Fran Brown here in about 15 minutes. I wonder if that particular topic will come up. Atan Thomas joins us next on ESPN Radio.